meticulously tending to every one of Dad's needs. And to my mother, who raised all of us together with our father. And when she left us 25 years ago, approximately, Dad's world was darkened, and along came Judy to provide the light. So as the rabbi mentioned, our father's name means light, but a lot of the light that he was able to give us over the years, last 22 years specifically, was a reflection of the light that was being shown upon him by Judy. Parkinson's is a cruel disease. It robs the body of the ability to walk, to speak, and to move one's limbs. So why would Hashem afflict the arms of a man who never missed a day of putting on tefillin in the horrors of Nazi Germany, on the battlefields in Korea, and while raising 8 children in a wilderness, the Torah wilderness, known as Columbus, Ohio? Why would Hashem flick the arms in the hands of a man who made sure that everyone else in Columbus, Ohio had a lulav and esrog to hold in their hands? Why would Hashem afflict the legs of a man who walked miles every Shabbos to make sure that services, proper halachic services, were held in the old age home, Heritage House in Columbus, Ohio? Why would Hashem afflict the mouth and voice of a man who used his voice to daven for the elderly every Shabbos and every Yom Tov, from beginning to the end, from Kol Nidre to Ne'ilah, to ensure that those confined to the old age home would be able to daven in a halachically structured minyan? Why would Hashem afflict the voice of a man who sang Zemiros so beautifully, who lamed every Shabbos, who read the Megillah for all? Why would Hashem afflict the mouth of a man, our father, who used his mouth to blow shofar, not only for the elderly residents of Heritage House, but for anyone and everyone in Columbus that was too ill, too infirmed, or too disconnected from Yiddishkeit to go to shul on Rosh Hashanah, crisscrossing the city miles, so that everyone could fulfill the mitzvah of shofar. His voice, his mouth, his words were utilized to humor people, to cheer people up when they were down, to bring people closer to Yiddishkeit. He was a brilliant orator, serving as the preferred master of ceremonies at event after event. But the most important use of his mouth, his voice, was his non-wavering adherence to halacha, to kashrus, to mikvah, to chevra kadisha, to shmiras Shabbos. His voice, his opinion, was always solicited when matters of religious observance in Columbus were at issue. The Jewish Center wanted to open their pool on Shabbos. My father was at the forefront of the protests. Heritage House, the home for the aged, wanted to install a microphone in the shul, where Dad led the tefillah for, 25 years. Dad led the protest. Jewish organizations in Columbus didn't care whether their yearly dinners were kosher, whether their functions were kosher or not. Dad was at the forefront of the battle. And as long as Dad was there, they all backed down. He won every religious battle. No microphone, no pool on Shabbos, and kosher dinners. Why? Because all that encountered Dad, from the Reform rabbis to the non-Jewish staff at hotels and hospitals, respected my father and thought that it would be worthwhile to listen to such a holy man. And they respected him because his voice, His message was never condescending. It was sweet. The voice was sweet. The message was sweet. He was able to frame the religious argument in a way that was candy, honey to those that really were unaffiliated, unconcerned with the details of halacha. He never compromised, never, not once, when it came to upholding the halachic standards in Columbus, Ohio. There wasn't an aspect of Yiddishkeit that he wasn't involved with. He created tens, if not hundreds of people that span generations that somehow, despite their lack of desire to, somehow found themselves eating kosher, davening with a kosher minyan, having a proper tahara, and was all accomplished with sweetness. He was successful because people sensed his sincerity. People, all types of people gravitated to him. When he served as the director of the welfare department for the state of Ohio, the Xmas party changed its name to the end of the year party because they didn't want to offend my father. And all the employees accommodated this one Jew and changed the name of their party from the Xmas party to the end of the year party, and had it at our house so that my father wouldn't have to watch everybody else eat non-kosher food, and he would be unable to eat. So it was at our house, and kosher food was served to all. When my mother would make her biannual trip to the hospital to have a baby, they took down the cross in the room out of respect for my parents. So why would Hashem afflict the arms and the legs and the voice of a man who utilized his arms and legs and voice in the service of Hashem? Why would Hashem afflict the hands of a man who used his hands to type a letter every week to all of his children and his parents for over 30 years, maybe more? Do the math. Thousands of letters every week to his children and to his parents as we were spread all over the country. Thousands of letters over the years chronicling our lives, letters that we will hold on to forever. His values were Hashem's values. While my friends received toys and vacations for their bar mitzvahs, Dad bought me a Megillah. That was my bar mitzvah present. And he made me promise that I would use it every year on Purim to read for somebody who could not make it to shul. And I've kept that promise because that's what Dad did with his shofar, with his Megillah, and with his standards. Community members and strangers would call upon Dad to settle disputes because above all, he was a peacemaker. Never lost his temper. He was a unifier because he was sincere. And combatants melted when his sincerity and good nature and humor overpowered their baseless hate. He lived in many worlds. As halachic as he was, that's how entrenched he was in the ways of the world. He knew history and politics, and he made sure that we, his children, were able to have both feet in both worlds as well. As a family, we would watch the evening news at 6:30, and as a family, we would stay up late and watch the Johnny Carson show, because life's cruel messages, as delivered by the evening news, had to be tempered with a bit of humor as well. That's how Dad was able to convince, persuade, and influence so many to see and to taste the beauty of an Orthodox Jewish way of life, Jew and non-Jew alike. So why would Hashem make it impossible in these last months for Dad to utilize his facial muscles to smile when his essence was to make everybody else laugh and smile? I'll tell you why. We live in a world where people want to show off what they did, what they accomplished with their hands and with their feet and with their words. Till the end, with recurrent bouts of pneumonia and infections, the Parkinson's, while the arms and the legs and the voice would no longer function, while the voice that was so persuasive and comforting, while all of those ceased to function, Dad's heart didn't skip a beat, and his heart remained strong to the end. It was as if Hashem was sending a message. True, actions might speak louder than words, but in the final analysis, if a man's actions are not dictated by a warm, vibrant, compassionate heart, that man, with all of his deeds, everything he did with his arms and his legs and his voice, all of that is meaningless if the driving force moving those muscles was not a good, comforting, and warm and compassionate heart. So Hashem stilled the limbs and muted the voice of a man who spent his entire life using his limbs and voice to raise a family of Orthodox Jews and to introduce Judaism to an entire community, Jew and non-Jew alike. He stilled those limbs and muted that voice, but kept the heart strong. So we would learn the lesson that actions mean nothing unless standing behind them are a strong and warm heart. 25 years ago, we closed one chapter of our lives when Mom Allahu Shalom passed away. And now we close another chapter. The pasuk in Eichos states, "Yisayim hayinu ve'ein av," we are orphans and we have no father. And that seems redundant because, by definition, if a person is an orphan, they have no father. Chazal explained the pasuk, which describes the Jewish people at the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash as follows: we are orphans. Our parents, our leaders have left us. Ve'ein av, and we have no av, we have no aleph beis. We have no foundation upon which to continue to build. But Dad and Mom left us with an entire alphabet, aleph through taf, with an incredible foundation, with memories to last more than a lifetime, of a man, a community leader, a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, a teacher, a husband, a friend, respected by all, not just for what his arms and legs and voice accomplished in this world, but because of his tremendous heart, laden with sincerity and devotion that motivated his limbs and his voice in service to Hashem, to his community, and to his family. His weekly letters to us were always typed, except for the last two words. Those last two words were always written in ink. Love, Dad. Because the typewriter can be impersonal. We use the same typewriter, we produce the same document, but a person's handwriting, that's unique. It is as unique as a person's heart. Love, Dad had to be written in ink, had to be written in his handwriting from his heart.
Just our father, Vinny, Shos, Rabbi Kamenetsky, Rabbi Kaufman, and Rabbi Drucker. It's very meaningful to our father. I know that these Rabbanim are here. For one of his standout characteristics was a tremendous, tremendous Mekir Rabbanim, a tremendous, tremendous respect for Talmidei Chachamim. And I can tell you clearly how much he appreciated the three of these Rabbanim who are here. Warm words that we heard through the past decades that he spent here in Edison. And thank you on behalf of the family for making him so welcome in his adopted community. Thank you as well to Dr. Judy. As my older brother had indicated, our father's world became completely dark with the passing of our mother, Alaha Shalom. He was bereft of spirit and Simchas L'chaim, and you reintroduced that into his life, the ability to travel when health was provided that opportunity. And thank you for those golden years as well. My older brother mentioned it, but I have to mention it again. There are no words that we can express to express our gratitude for Tammy and Milton and Tiki. We could be here all day and it would still be inadequate. You were more than just our shliach. You rewrote the book on what Kibbut Avein is. Really, truly rewrote the book. And that's something which will always be an example and an inspiration to us. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that Josh, with all the limitations of distance of miles, well, obviously he couldn't be there to the same extent, spend the same amount of hours physically as Tammy and Milton and Tiki. But he came in a very, very close second. Really, the hours of dedication and commitment and subservience and true love. And Josh, we will forever be indebted to you, both for what you did for Dad, Alav Shalom, and for the inspiration and lessons you instilled not only within your children, but within us as well, what Kibbut Av truly is. There's an expression which those in the rabbinate are well familiar with, of taking the parshios of these weeks and reciting them together as a phrase, Achrei Mos Kedoshim Emor. And the line goes, and Achrei Mos Kedoshim Emor. After someone passes on, then every rabbi eulogizes him in such a way that he's Kaddish, that he's holy. You walk into a Hesped, and sometimes, if you're a little bit cynical, you scratch your head and you say, are we thinking about the same person? Achrei Mos Kedoshim Emor. But here we stand next to our Father Alav Shalom's Aron, and we know that whatever we say doesn't scratch the surface of his specialness, his kindness, his humor, his golden heart. And I want to focus for a moment David so eloquently pointed out the heroic acts of our father in his partnership together with our mother, Shalom, of building a community and building families and building Klal Yisrael in Columbus, Ohio. And David spoke of our father, the hero, and that's all true. That's all true. That the standards that there are right now in a city which now has a kollel and Baruch Hashem Adei, he was really at the forefront of so many of these endeavors. But I want to just take a few moments to paint a little bit of a picture of just a few vignettes, not necessarily of our father, the public hero and warrior, which he was for Yiddishkeit, of the one who walked 45 minutes to an hour and more each way in the muggy hot summers of Columbus, Ohio, in the high snows, and he bought himself, if you remember, this long down coat just to be able to make that walk. And sometimes our mother, Shalom, would say, do you really still think it's necessary? And he would tell her that the day I stop doing it is the day they bring in a conservative rabbi. And we can't have that happen. So those are the public endeavors. I want to share just 3 vignettes that pop into my mind. I still remember when I was getting ready to go to Eretz Yisrael to learn in yeshiva. And I was packing. And I remember as if it were yesterday, Dad sitting in my room in the bed opposite mine, David's bed. Mine was one that was made. Sitting on the opposite bed and just sitting with me there as I packed. And you could see the emotion. You could see that big heart. Here he was sending off a child to Eretz Yisrael. Really, it was 2 at the same time because David and I went the same year. And he couldn't tear himself away from the room. And he just sat there. And there was a certain somberness, if you will, and a certain sadness on the one hand and a certain satisfaction on the other hand. It was so difficult for him on an emotional level that one of his children was going to be so far away. And he didn't tear himself away, for he just sat there on the bed as I packed. And at the same time, that it was such an emotionally difficult thing for him. And I saw how meaningful it was, and how it, I don't want to say hurt him, but it was something which was very sad for him on the one hand. At the same time, the encouragement. I remember we were going to the airport, and he said to me, I won't be the least surprised. And he meant, I won't be upset. He said, I won't be the least surprised when you call us at the end of the year and you say, now I want another year. He was able to, with that emotional desire and want to keep us close, to let us go and spread our wings. I still remember, our house was filled with Baalei Tshuva and filled with singles. And the invitations didn't have to necessarily be rendered in advance. It was understood that my father would bring home whoever was in shul, who didn't have a place, and that's the way it was, and that's what my mother Lashon expected. And I remember one of the young women who was a Baalei Tshuva, I still remember her asking my father, as she was trying to figure out the whole thing of Orthodox Judaism as she was getting acclimated into it. She says, if you didn't go to Ner Yisrael, how come you send all your sons to Ner Yisrael? You went to Yitzchak Elchanan, you sent all your sons to Ner Yisrael. In this Orthodox world, don't people normally send their children to the alma mater of the place where they went themselves? And he said to this young woman as follows. He said, I give my children the absolute most intensive spiritual experience I can give them. So that if they only retain a percentage of it, let them retain a percentage of the most intensive experience that I can give them. I want to share another vignette. I can share it because I know that my siblings are of such character they won't be jealous. I mentioned earlier how he was such a Micah Rabbanim. And I meant how he appreciated all 3 of the Rabbanim who were here and how he spoke about them. And would tell me over things he heard from various of the 3 Rabbanim who are here. I want to give just another vignette. when I assumed the shul in Baltimore, the pulpit in Baltimore, so at the time I was driving a car which had been provided for me from the yeshiva where I worked. It was okay, it was serviceable, didn't bother me in the least. It was fine, it was acceptable. And then when I became a pulpit rabbi, he had an almost new car that he had just bought barely a couple years before, a very dignified looking car. And he arranged to donate it to the shul that I should drive that instead. I said, what I have is perfectly serviceable. It's fine. You don't need to do this and buy yourself a new car. And he said to me as follows. He said, you know, as a pulpit rabbi, you're going to be in a lot of federation meetings where there's going to be Reform and conservative rabbis. And their congregations are all providing them with fancy cars. He said, I don't want it to be that the Orthodox rabbi walks into the meeting, when he leaves the meeting, he's any less dignified looking in terms of what they appreciate, because they appreciate only things of temporal value. I don't want it to be that they look at the Orthodox rabbi as the schlepper, that he's in any way less dignified in those terms of what matters to them. This subtlety, this being Micah Rabbanim, was just a vignette and an inkling of what guided him. I say it with a little bit of trepidation because I remember once picking up my sister Tammy from the train station as she visited us in Baltimore, and we were walking away from the car. She pointed and said, "You left Dad's lights on." But I say that over also because where did that humor come from? That humor that you see in the children that came from my father. Always with a quip, always with a smile, always with an encouraging way of looking at life. In conclusion, I asked Mechila if we ever took advantage of his good nature and of his humor and his accommodation. And we say that we will strive with the years that we have left to 120 to always live our lives in a way which is a manifestation of the integrity, the ehrlichkeit, the honesty, the values which so guided him. May his memory be a blessing.
Rabbi Drucker, my older brothers. It's going to seem that I cribbed a little bit from what David said, but that means that if David and I see and identify and talk about the same thing, it means it's the truth. Soloveitchik said that all of the Nehugi Avelis can be traced to one principle, and it's the loss of personal, social esteem. And then Ashura Noed Cotton, he explained it as saying that so long as the family unit is intact, children draw their sense of place of being in a community, their sense of pride, who they are, and the people from which they came. And when that rock, that foundation is shattered and doesn't exist anymore, they're garnished. And the garnish doesn't shave, the garnish doesn't take a haircut, sits on a low stool and doesn't go to weddings. So I'm going to refer back in a few minutes of remarks today to an article both Johnathan and David spoke about my dad's service to Heritage House, which was the old H on the Columbus. But when my father retired after 30 years there, the Jewish newspaper ran an article. They covered a reception that was held in his honor. I'm going to refer back to a few things that were written about my father in this article, things that people in the community noticed. And I ask my father's forgiveness for referring to him in this way with his first name, but it's a quote. Michael Seidemann is one of the most giving persons in this community. Self-effacing, humble, modest. He's a true example of what a Torah Jew is all about. Over the past several years, as Dad's health began to take some turns and declines for the worse, I found myself thinking often about the aspects of my father and his relationship with his family and his community, particularly in Columbus where we were raised. And thank God, despite the challenges that my father faced over the last few years, I was able to share some of these thoughts with him in conversation, and letters, often sharing those lessons that I learned from him at the day, at a time in the calendar when it was appropriate. I was fond of saying that Dad taught me to blow shofar, to learn Megillah, to daven, but not how to blow shofar, and not how to learn Megillah, and not how to daven. Dad didn't teach me how to do them; he taught me to do them. I was taught this by watching Dad practice the Kiyah shofar during Chodesh Elul, because as Johnathan David said, he was about to get the old age home. He walked once after walking the 2 miles back and forth to the Heritage House on Rosh Hashanah, then walked 3 miles each way downtown to blow shofar for Chazan Gelman, who was in the hospital. Megillah, watching Dad laying every year for Mom in the living room, so that Mom didn't have to rush out to shul in the morning when there were all these kids to come to take care of. Knowing that Dad could be called upon in any shul by any gabbai, any segment of the tefillah, be it Lachdik, be it Shabbos, be it Yontif, be it Yom Neroim, and knowing that he could take the Yom with skill, understanding, nusach, and a pleasant voice. A measure of what Dad meant to others was revealed to me a number of years ago. I would find this hard to believe, but I dated over the years. And I asked someone in Columbus, "Do you have any advice about the this type of a situation?" The guy looks at me and he goes, your father would actually be the perfect person to talk to. He's so skilled at working through these situations. But of course, he's your dad, so you can't talk to him about you. But I knew that that was the moment that it crystallized for me that Dad was not just the kibbutzer in shul, but he was a trusted advisor. Peacemaker, as David said, but also for younger guys coming to him for advice. How do I deal with this family situation? I have a job issue. Talk about the kibbutzing. I remember at someone's offer, if a guy in shul who was about 6'2", Dad went over to him and said, "I used to be as tall as you. 35 years of marriage later, look at me now." Dad had an unfailing sense of humor. I don't think it's a secret that with 8 kids and day school tuition, for a state worker, there can be significant pressures at home. You'd never know it. Dad worked for the state, arriving at the office every day at about 7:30 in the morning, so he could be home by around 5. We ate an early dinner, after which Dad then went to work a second job at either Jewish Family Service, counseling couples, or teaching community college at night, a couple nights a week. Those, of course, were just the first and second job. There was a third job at Heritage House, and then there was a 4th job taking care of the hashgacha of the hotels in Columbus. Dad's sense of dignity for others was remarkable. It might have been an outgrowth of his experiences as a refugee from Nazi Germany who arrived nearly penniless in the United States with my grandparents and Uncle Hans. Those experiences may have formed Dad's impressions. Dad remembers Rabbi Wolgalanter Zatzal coming into the homes of immigrants on Wednesday, checking the icebox. If he didn't see anything, by Thursday there was a chicken there for Shabbos. Dad's recollections of his bar mitzvah, and Dad wrote these down for us. I prevailed upon him about 10 years ago to write down his memories. He received a pen, a used tie that someone in the shul had cleaned for him and then gave to him, and a can of pineapple that the family ate Motzei Shabbos, and then tore the label off before discarding the can so that the landlady wouldn't report them to the welfare board for having exceeded wartime rations. Dad told me once of a woman in the community who came collecting for Achnos's Kala. Dad asked her, "How are you going to give the bride the money?" And she said, "Well, we're just going to shove it in her purse in the yichud room. She's not looking." And Dad said, "You're going to shame her. She's going to find the envelope of cash there, and she's going to know that someone thought she needed charity." I'll give you a better idea. Call the caterer, call the florist, call the hall. Find out what they're charging her and pay down the bill for her. Let those vendors give the couple a reduced bill. The couple will retain the dignity and pride, thinking that they paid the entire bill themselves, but you'll have reduced her burden. That sort of sensitivity, I think, encapsulates Dad's character, what he meant to us, and to his community. thinking about others creatively, sensitivity, and as my brother said, earning the respect of rabbis and laymen alike from across the spectrum of the Jewish community. Just refer back a couple more times to this article. Community leader Ben Mandelhorn said, "I've never seen such a dedicated, committed, religious-oriented person who has retained devotion to an institution of a non-congregational nature as he has." And after describing the walks that my brothers described, the article ends with an account of another fellow in Columbus, a physician who was visiting a relative in the old age home, shook Dad's hand and said, "Wait a minute, I want to say something to you." He went, found the sitter, he opened it up and said, "I think this pretty much encapsulates Mr. Seidemann. Mia leb ahar Hashem, mia kuli gam hatsho, v'kikapayim ha'levov asher lo nosah l'shav nafshi v'lo nishkol l'merma." Who's going to see it, ahar Hashem? Someone with clean hands, pure heart, doesn't know how to convey things, doesn't speak with deceit. I'd like to echo my brother's thanks to Tammy, Milton, and Tiki for your aggressively looking after Dad's interests and vetting nursing homes, doctors and facilities, relying upon your professional expertise and your personal connections in the community to really smooth things out.
The Kfura will take place at the family cemeteries in Elmwood, Beth David cemeteries, around the border of Queens. The family will be sitting Shiva immediately after the Kfura at 22 Beechwood Drive, Lawrence, New York. The family will be sitting there, they'll be doing Sudas Havra there. And on Friday afternoon, after Mincha in Lawrence, the entire Mishpacha will come back to Highland Park Edison area to sit Shiva at Tammy's home at 10 Brookville Avenue. And they'll be there the entire Shabbos together. And then after Sunday morning, late, the Mishpacha will then be returning to their respective communities. Communities in Washington Heights, in Silver Spring, in Baltimore, Passaic, Lawrence, and of course, Tammy and Judy will be here in Edison Island Park. The minhag of our shul is to accompany Malava the Aron till the end of the parking lot. We ask everyone to do so. And then immediately after we get to the end of the parking lot, please, without delay, get into your car if you're planning on coming to the Beis Olam, to the cemetery. As the hour is late, and we have to get there scheduled after 1 o'clock to fulfill the mitzvah, of course. That makes. We ask everyone now to please rise. El Molei Rachamim, Sheikhein Mamreinim, Hamitzei Melucha Nechoino, Al Kanfei Ashchino, B'Mahalois Kedoshim, U'Toirim Gezorekim Azirim, Es Nishmat Reb Meir ben Rabbi Yeshayahu, Shehalach Li'olamon, Bavur Shishtoy,
Wohnen Benoiso, Benechto, Bechoisono, Bechaloso, Bechol Mishpachto, Bikilako Yishoye Bemes, Becholonu Kan. Mispalalim, Bli Neder, Noitin Stoko Manaskoras Nishmosoi. Began Eden, Tei Menuchosoi, Lachem Balarachamim. Yasti Reyu B'Seiser K'nafach Li'olamim. Vitzor Achayim Es Nishmosoi. Adonai Hu Nachalosoi. V'yanuach B'Shol Mishkovoi. V'noimar Omen.